Welcome to Spirit Outspoken, where we dive deep into the realms of spirituality, healing, and the beautiful chaos we call life.
From ancient traditions to modern practices, we are going to explore it all. Whether you're a newbie or a seasoned seeker, you're guaranteed to find something that inspires, challenges, and intrigues you here.
So grab your favorite beverage, find a cozy spot to curl up, and join us for Spirit Outspoken. Hello, and welcome back to Spirit Outspoken. Today, we are diving into part 2 of our discussion on telepathy tapes, which if you listened to last week, you will know this is an incredibly interesting, fascinating, mind-blowing podcast. It's number 1 currently. It's beat out every other podcast out there, and everyone's talking about it, including us. So we are going to take another little deep dive in. Last time we touched on exactly what the podcast was about, which is nonverbal autistic children and adults having telepathic abilities. And this kind of first starting to show up, caregivers, parents, family members, friends, having this feeling of, oh my gosh, they know what's happening. They're finding things. They're, I think about losing something and all of a sudden they're bringing it to me. Or I come home and they know exactly where the Halloween candy is. All these
that they like intentionally hid when the kid wasn't home, right?
Yes. And
crazy
then
stuff.
The reason that we really know it now is that some of these nonverbal kids have been able to start using keyboards as a way to communicate. And so they're starting to communicate messages, and these experiments have taken place, and they're starting to prove with 100% accuracy that these individuals are, in fact, reading people's minds, seeing what they're seeing, and able to communicate in all these different ways that we didn't even know about.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So let's dive back in. Today, we're going to look at a different species, animals.
Animals.
And believe it or not, there have been lots of different studies where animals apparently have telepathic abilities.
No, you guys, this is crazy. And this is like really well documented.
Yes.
And these are people that are doing these studies that are hard-nosed skeptics.
Yes.
These are people from the scientific community that, may have gotten intrigued or something happened in their fields that got them interested in this line of work. But it's truly fascinating. So one of the first examples that they talk about is birds. And I've talked about birds on a previous episode. Like you and I both shared how there's synchronicities with you eagles, with me cranes. And I don't know, I guess my theory was the reason why the spiritual world uses birds is because they can be very sensitive to frequencies, right? Like that's their migration patterns every year follow, the frequencies of the earth. And that's how they know how to get from point A to point B every single time.
Yes.
So they have also seen some telepathic behavior throughout the animal kingdom. And one example was starlings. So packs of hundreds of birds will change on a dime without flying into each other.
Yes.
It's almost like this precognition that happens, or they're all tapped into the same brainwave and they're almost like making decisions together.
Yes.
It's the only way that you can explain it. And I've actually witnessed this. Like we were out with a walk with our kids, and there was like, oh my gosh, packs and packs and packs, thousands of them. And they would just move in sequence.
Yes.
And it was fascinating to watch. And so like they've seen and reported that there has to be something going on quicker than this bird able to be like, oh, I'm hyper vigilant and able to like change on a dime. Like something frequency is underlying their movements.
And their movements are not slow and steady.
No.
If you've ever seen these birds, they are like jumping like up, down, sideways, over, and all at the same time. It's fascinating.
Sequence, like they're one.
Yes.
Like they're one. Another one that was really interesting is this study that they did with dogs and their owners.
Yeah,
so
I love this one.
Really cool. I know I am not a dog owner. Rachel is.
Yeah.
And Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy. I feel like I'm looking at Murphy differently these days, like looking deep into his eyes, like trying to communicate with him.
He's like, where's the food?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's so weird. I had the exact same thought. Okay. So dogs and their owners. So one thing that what they did, and this was like a while ago. So they had pagers. The dog owner had a pager. And they'd be out and about doing their business. And the people that were observing these dogs and filming them, they would get a page. Okay, now's the time to come home. So the owner would get a signal and they would start coming home, whether driving, walking, or whatever. And they would see almost an immediate shift in the dog's behavior, anticipatory energy from the dog, like getting up, standing by the window, looking for the owner, anticipating the owner. And they actually saw in one instance where the dog lost interest and they're like, oh, okay, like I'm not going to stay by the window anymore. And the owner got a phone call that they had to like stay late at work, or they actually had to like, there was like a family emergency was the other. There was like 2 instances, and the dog knew that there was changed plans and the owner wasn't going to be coming home until later.
And so they went back and laid down. Yeah.
And they lay down and they're like, okay, they're not going to come back yet. And this has been replicated over and over and over
crazy.
by different scientists under different conditions, controls, studies. This isn't like a one and done. This has been replicated.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was really crazy. Then there's this bird, a kisi.
Oh, this one's wild.
This one's wild. So what's really interesting is like we think about the nonverbal community, right? And like that's animals. Like animals can't speak to us.
Right.
But parrots can.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was almost interesting where like, okay, you see, because like this is like this whole concept of like this like kind of chipping away at our concept of consciousness. Like it gets so much more confusing and complex than just to say like, I can think your thoughts.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that, right? Because as these nonverbal autistic children demonstrated, they could also see.
Yes.
Right? So I'm
almost see through someone else's eyes.
Yes. Yeah. So like one of the things that one of the children, Mia, was asked, like, so how does this work? Like, can you see through your mother's eyes? And she said, I can see everywhere.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, what? Can you see what I'm doing right now? I'm in my underwear. So that was really cool. And so this bird, a kisi, they were able to replicate these studies, and they have like video evidence of it. They like you can research all of this, where basically this bird could not only think the owner's thoughts, right? Like telepathic abilities with the owner, but could see and interpret what she was looking at.
Yes.
So, and I really encourage you to listen to this episode so you can hear for yourself.
Yeah, this was fun.
This was fun.
This was
like
cool
the
to
animal
listen
one
to.
was really cool. So basically, like to explain it, like Jane Goodall went to go visit this bird, right? This bird was like famous. And so the owner was like in a different room, and she was looking at a picture. She was looking at a picture of a guy like trying to like hail a cab or something. And she was looking at kind of the guy like in the car with its like head stuck out the window. And she's looking at this picture, and you hear a kisi say like, watch out, you might hit your head. Watch out, put your head in the car. Like literally interpreting and obviously seeing what she's seeing, but he's also able to say like, that's a risk for this person. It's dangerous to have his head sticking out of the window, right? Like,
yeah.
How does this bird know this?
And what portion of the picture she was looking at? Because apparently this picture that she was looking at was a city scene. So there was lots of different things going on.
Exactly.
And so it's not like he just said, oh, she's, like city scene.
Exactly. Yeah. But even then you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
No, It was wild. And that actually reminds me, I know I'm going off topic of the animal stuff, but I think one of the things like one of the guys that was involved with the animals was talking about was there was this child that had significant physical disabilities. And this is a long time ago. So they don't even have record of what his disability was, but he was nearly blind, could not see.
Oh, yes. I remember this. Yes.
Yes.
Keep going.
So the child is looking at the seeing eye board. What do you call that? When you're
the eye chart at the doctor.
The seeing eye board. Oh my gosh. I need to get my brain checked. Okay. So the child's looking at it and is reporting back like 100% accurate. And the doctor's like, what's happening here? Like this kid can't see. And then he's like looking at the mom, like, are you like signaling something to him? Are you doing something? And she's like, I'm not doing anything. So he's like, leave the room. So she leaves the room. The kid can't do it. Mom comes back in, can do it. Leaves, can't do it. So with his inability to see, right? It's almost like you lose a sensory part of your system. They're connected to their mother and able to do it through them, right? Yeah. So it's not only just nonverbal, we're seeing it even in situations where children can't see.
Yeah. Well, I think it reminded me, what I kept thinking of during this whole podcast is it's similar to, you hear about someone who's blind and their hearing is so much more intensified.
Oh, yeah.
Or you hear, they lose their hearing and their sight is so amazing. And it just makes sense that for these kids who maybe can't speak, it's just another sense that is heightened in them more so than other people.
Yes. And isn't there I feel like or maybe you were teaching me about this, where there's an individual in the savant community that was relaying 20,000 digits, but he does it through he's got a certain condition. What is it called?
Yeah, synesthesia. So what that means is it's where two of your senses kind of get combined. So for example, if you hear music, you might see colors. So sounds have color, or it's like two senses are combined together. So there was this man named Daniel Tennant, and he was a mathematical savant. And so he could do advanced math calculations in his head at the age of 4. And so eventually he went on to win this international contest where he was reciting pi, the number pi,
yes,
that's infinite and goes on forever. So he was able to recite pi to the longest digit. And this is crazy. He recited it to over 22,000 digits. And when he was asked about it, it wasn't that he memorized it. He just said that he was seeing it almost as a ticker tape of colors and shapes. And each of those colors and shapes was associated with a number. So it was almost like he was watching it go by and just reciting what he was seeing.
And this is accepted by the scientific community. What did you call it again?
Synesthesia.
That is a
diagnosed.
Yes. That is an accepted mutation, if you will, of your senses.
Yes.
So going back to your original comment, if you can't speak, what is it to say that you can't have a higher sense of intuition?
Right.
Yeah. Or your connection to these frequencies. One other anecdote on the topic of animals.
Oh my gosh, the elephants. Are we going to go there?
We're going to go there.
I love this one.
So Lawrence Anthony lived in South Africa with his wife. At one point, he decided to buy a game refuge. And he learned of a group of 9 elephants that were going to be killed because they kept messing with this local village, right? These 9 elephants just kept
coming in,
right? Obviously a danger. So they're okay, we're going to kill these elephants. So Lawrence was I don't want that to happen. So what he did is he actually went in to go live with the elephants to gain their trust. So he's living in the bush. Okay. And he almost gets trampled 2 different times. Mm-hmm. And over time, he gains their trust. So he somehow convinced these guys to come with him, mobilize to his refuge. And they do. So they trust him, get him to the refuge. And at some point, a few years later, Lawrence died of a heart attack. Okay. So 2 days after his death, 21 elephants, all of them on the preserve, walked 2 days to go and stand vigil at Lawrence's house after he had passed.
Oh my gosh. And in the podcast, you guys, they talk about how these elephants were making distress noises. And
yes.
I mean, think about 21 elephants outside of your home making these calls. They've walked 2 days. No idea, obviously. I mean, no way to communicate with them that this has happened. They just show up.
Even if somebody went to the preserve and was hey, everybody, Lawrence passed. And then they're thanks for letting me know. We're going to go mourn with the family. But nobody told them.
Yeah.
And even if they did, the fact that they could process that information and take action on it is absolutely out there. This is sci-fi experience. And this was all captured on news cameras. This is a fairly well-known story. So look it up, Lawrence Anthony. And one thing that was really crazy, and this is I'm sure you thought this was equally as mind-blowing, was the anniversary thing.
Oh my, that was to me the most mind-blowing. Yeah. So what happened for the next 3 to 4 years after his passing, the whole herd again would show up every March 4th and gather outside of his house on the anniversary of his death. And, what they were talking about on the podcast too, is this just proves like there's a deeper connection between all living things, that we are all connected and that there is something greater that binds us all.
Absolutely. And I don't want to go too off on a tangent, but I've always sort of thought I've struggled with the concept of God being this man in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in Christianity, everyone kind of hangs on to the scripture, man was made in God's image. But I was thinking more recently, it was actually after I listened to the telepathy tapes and started thinking about the concept of consciousness, where I was like, I think our spirit was made in God's image, not our bodies.
Yeah.
So when he says you, it's like the real us, not our mask, not our body, not this flesh, the thing that is for infinity, for perpetuity, that's always been and always will be.
Yes.
This energy, right? That is our spirit and our soul.
And our true selves.
And our true selves. So he said, I made you in God's image, not your body. And I started thinking about that. And I was like, man, I think God is this all-encompassing energy that infuses everything we see, everything we feel. And, the scientific community has actually recognized recently that there is this cohesive, energetic field everywhere.
Yeah.
And they could measure it, but they don't know what it is. So it's is that God?
Yeah.
I don't know. I digress. But I just start that's what the thing that's really cool about not only the telepathy tapes, but kind of trying to unpack what consciousness really is. It's not just this gray matter with neurons firing. It's so much more than that.
Well, what's interesting is if you've ever read any of Eckhart Tolle's books, in it, he talks about you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. That is all ego, right? That none of that is truly us.
Yes.
Which is really hard to get I remember reading that the first time and I was like, what? I'm not my thoughts? How am I not my thoughts? And he described it as a good exercise is to sit and to get really still and quiet and calm and then think about who is it behind my eyes looking through my eyes. And that's the real you. There's no thought.
I just got goosebumps. This stuff gets me going.
Yeah. And it's true. That we are not any of anything, even our minds. We are not, our mind is not our soul.
Our mind is not our soul. It's such a good point. We are not our personalities, right?
Right.
And the thing, did you ever read Untethered Soul by Michael Singer?
No.
That was the first book that I was poof.
I read the Surrender Experiment by him, which is another one. We should do both of those as a book club thing.
We'll just do a little cliff note brain swap. It's we're splitting up the college responsibility. It's you study for this test, I'll study for the other one. We'll exchange notes. But it was the same concept where he was if you can observe your thoughts and your brain chatter, those are two different things.
Yes.
You cannot observe your self. Is that
your soul?
Well, no, it's what am I trying to say? It's if you can observe them and watch them happen in your own brain, it's they're disconnected.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're separating your ego from your soul.
Yes.
Right.
And it's the brain chatter of I shouldn't have done that, or I'm worried about this, and I'm going to be late. It's this brain is just going absolutely berserk.
Yeah.
And you're observing this and it's you feel like it's you because those thoughts create an emotional response. So you're feeling it. But to your point, who is actually observing the emotions and the thoughts?
It's true. Detaching from all of that is kind of the key.
Yes. Okay. So we unpacked a lot here.
Okay.
So, just to recap what we've talked about. So rigorous controls and studies with various different forms to test this telepathy or this higher level of seeing.
Yeah.
This gift. And I also think it's really important to demystify telepathy because I think historically speaking, people think ESP is do, right? Where savant syndrome, it's more broadly accepted as a gift.
Yes.
Right? So we need this shift, but I just want to recap what we've talked about so far. So we've talked about these gifts. We've talked about how they've been replicated in multiple different ways. We've talked about studies in animals.
Yeah.
So extends beyond just the human to human contact, but animals to animals, animals to humans, humans to animals. We're seeing public demand and intrigue around this, but we're not really seeing like the scientific community
Embrace
jumping on board.
No.
Why do you think that is?
So one thing that they talk about in the podcast is something called materialism, which I was not familiar with. So materialism or materialists, which is what we call the people who believe this model. And it's this belief that consciousness is based in the brain. So all of our thoughts, feelings, emotions are based on neurons firing up in our gray matter. Materialism is also the belief that the whole world is made up of physical stuff and matter. And the belief that's what's real, in quotes, is physical matter we can measure and observe. The problem is this is so entrenched in our scientific approach and lens that anyone or anything that aims to look, explore, or explain outside of that realm is often deemed as less educated or a weirdo or woo-woo or, it's just not taken seriously because for so long that has been the paradigm and the current paradigm that our scientists have been working in. And there's a lot of pushback even within the scientific community now saying, hey, we're starting to see evidence that there is more to this world than what we can see and touch. And now, because of advances in science and different things, we're starting to be able to prove this. But there still is a lot of pushback. And one thing that I love is they gave the example of it's no different than when everybody was convinced the earth was flat.
Oh, yeah.
That was the paradigm.
Absolutely.
And anybody who said, no, I think it's wrong and I think it's round,
they were laughed at.
They were laughed at. And
or
they
like
were seen as completely unintelligent or wacky or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're like, these shifts often have to go through that process. And it takes people a while to catch up. And, part of the problem they were referencing is so many people in the scientific community, teachers, people have been punished for bringing this. The doctor that we were referencing, Dr. Powell, she wrote a book called The ESP Enigma. And the medical board fined her and took away her medical license without even reading the book. And it wasn't until years later that they actually read the research that she was presenting that they reinstated her license.
What the hell?
Yeah. So people are afraid, even within the medical, teachers have been threatened that they're going to lose their license if they use some of these spelling techniques because people deem them as, quackery and crazy and not true.
Like to unpack some of the drama around the spelling. So they basically are making insinuations that these teachers or these parents, and I kind of explained it in the first episode of like what they're punching letters into a board or they're like using a screen with different letters and numbers, that these teachers or parents are guiding.
Yeah. And in essence, influencing what they're typing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, like, fine. If you want to be a hater, but it's like they have to start somewhere.
Right.
And these kids often have physical disabilities where they cannot lift their arms and legs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are like wheelchair bound. So like, don't shut it down. And, it's like, it's so irritating to me that people are looking for reasons to discount and disbelieve when the evidence really reveals otherwise.
And there are independent typers.
Oh, exactly. That's my point.
And that's the thing. Like eventually the goal is to allow them to type independently. And there are many people who are nonverbal autistic people who are able to type on their own.
Right away.
And yes. And they also were mentioning that a lot of these kids, as they've been able to type, have talked about, like, one autistic child said he wasn't even like aware that he had a physical body. So sometimes the touch just helps them come back and actually kind of get in touch with their physical senses, because so many of these people describe that they aren't even really here in the physical realm the way we are. And they're not in tune with their physical bodies or physical things the way we are. And so they need some assistance in kind of bridging that gap.
It's absolutely true. And I think, like, I don't know. I just think that, oh, God, if we just would let go. You know what this reminds me of? Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Do you know this story? So he was a complete outcast his entire life. It wasn't until after he died that he was recognized for his extreme contributions to the scientific community.
Yeah.
His entire life, he was laughed at, an outcast. I mean, I guess like he was quirky, he was a little out there, but he was celebrated as one of history's most brilliant inventors. And this is contributions around alternating currents, wireless communication, and renewable energy, which inspires a lot of our modern technologies today.
Yeah.
Right. But when he was alive, like he was like, basically he was so far ahead of his time that people just like made him an outcast.
Yeah.
And like, this is no different. And like, why have we not learned from our mistakes?
Well, you and I, and a lot of people have this very open approach to learning and are open to hearing different philosophies and things. But there's a lot of people who see the world differently and or are afraid, right? Because what does this say if we essentially are admitting, oh my gosh, we've had it wrong. Like we've had this all backwards.
Oh, and also like, not to get like really conspiracy theorist, but like, why not?
Yeah, why not?
So like a lot of the reasons pointing to why Tesla was sort of like silenced and shoved in the corner was because he had a pursuit of free wireless energy. And that conflicted with the economic interests with the emerging power companies at the time.
Yeah.
Well, so like, what would telepathy and this like understanding and remembering of who we are, who would that threaten?
It threatens the people in power, because if we step into who we are fully and we're no longer afraid and we're no longer able to be controlled because we can access knowledge like never before. Some of these kids talk about, like we said, going places and being able to gain all this incredible knowledge through centuries and wisdom and insight. I think it threatens a lot of people.
Oh, everything would crumble.
Yeah.
Everything would crumble in a way that would need to.
Yeah.
Right? Like there would
in the best way.
In the best way.
Yeah.
In the best way. So you had written down some really powerful quotes.
Yes.
From
so
some
you
of
guys,
these beautiful kids.
Oh my gosh. The last episode, I almost think even if you want to just listen to one episode, the last episode is so powerful because what they did is it's just writing from the nonverbal autistic individuals themselves. And they are so profound and beautiful.
Oh.
And, the other thing about this podcast was, what it reminded me of from like a biblical thing? And I should have looked this Bible verse up, but I didn't. But what's the Bible verse about the last shall be first? So read it for us, Jason. Which one is it?
Yes. So it's Matthew 19:30. And it says, many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first.
And it's so poignant because throughout this series, it's reiterated time and time again that basically these people who we deem as low functioning, low intelligence, all these different things, because they don't conform and look and behave in the way that we think they should in this physical realm.
They don't fit into our box.
Right. But they actually are here to wake us up and be our greatest teachers. And it reminded me of that verse of like, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Because
I think these kids are like spiritual gurus.
Yes, they are here to lead and guide us. And that's what they say in so many of their things, that we have so much to say if people would only listen.
Oh, goosebumps.
I know. So we're going to get into the last episode, just is purely writing and different quotes from these nonverbal autistic kids.
Which I love.
And you guys, these beautiful words and
it's
deep.
so profound. And it's like
so
to
profound.
say it's poetic is like not even doing it justice.
Yes. So one of my favorites, and we can kind of toggle back and forth if you just want to read them, was from someone named Sammy. And they were asking about, what do you want people to know? What if you could tell the speakers, as they call us, something, what would you tell them? And Sammy said, it's blowing people's reality bubble to see beyond what their eyes have been trained to see. This brings to mind ABA or behavioral research techniques that try to train us out of our behaviors and sensory systems. But it is actually the general population that has been ABA trained because you've been trained to think in certain patterns that wired your neurology to keep running that pattern. You are not able to break out of this loop to advance yourself to a whole new level. It has been sad to witness from the higher dimensional perspective. Our main point of consciousness resides on a different reality plane, as many in your podcast have demonstrated. This has been a very positive turn of events. It's time to completely tear down the false reality bubble. What awaits you is a new human, the real human, actually. I mean,
I want to be the real human.
I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to read another one?
Yeah. So Lily was a little spitfire. I love Lily.
Oh, I love Lily.
Lily's got some gas in her motor.
Yeah, she does.
So there's a couple quotes. So one thing that we were talking about, like this group of people that are opposed to spelling. So Lily had some things to say about that. And she said, opposing spelling as a legitimate form of alternative communication needs to stop now. We need to be believed and supported. You cannot say we are fundamentally without rights just because we have bodies that betray us. Our minds are beautiful and non-speakers have so much to offer if you would only care to listen.
I love that.
And then she goes on to say, nothing will change until you believe us. We see and hear everything. We even hear thoughts, as you now are aware. We love and we hurt and we long to be included in the fabric of society as accepted, despite our unruly bodies. We autistics each experience the world in beautiful ways that voice users, I love that they call us voice users.
I know.
That voice users can only dream to understand. I want to be educated, included, and valued as a person who has much to offer. Good that we are getting this platform to share both our inner lives and our hopes and dreams.
You guys, I mean, to know that this is going on inside the mind of these people who, you have to keep in mind too, they've been in their classrooms being taught basic shapes and numbers and
year after year after year after year.
And this is what's really going on inside their head. They have so much to teach us.
They have so much to teach us. And not every school is created equal, right? Like a lot of schools, some of them really fully embrace typing. And those are the teachers that really advance their education because they know immediately how much is in there and that spirit and that knowledge and how they yearn to learn more.
Yeah.
Where other schools that don't embrace it are doing what we're sharing now of like really limiting their education to like preschool abilities.
Which is just so heartbreaking.
Which is heartbreaking.
And I loved this one. Can I just add this one? This was also from Lily. I just love everything she had to say. No change in humanity will come until humanity can realize that we are all mutually connected to each other. Be very mindful that we are about to go through a cataclysmic shift in the understanding of our fundamental nature of our relationship to the universe and everything in it. Each of life's little poignant moments point to an eternal reality more wonderful than we can imagine. We all from time to time go to the realms and learn new things from the vast storehouse of knowledge from over the centuries. Mainly want to say that most of us experience a pretty amazing world despite our physical constraints and limited, isolated at-home existence.
Absolutely incredible. Okay, I want to read this last one. This is a direct quote from Daniel. They need to know about emotions, how the energy of emotions impact everything. It impacts our cells, hormones, and how we interact with each other as a society. Emotional intelligence is key. It goes back to the knowledge of oneself. The knowledge of emotion is what society needs, what education needs, and what the medical field needs. Emotions are ignored across the board, and that must change.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And like, you know what was kind of cool too, is that all of these kids seem so sensitive to frequencies. Like one of them had shared, the mom had shared, who was like an evangelistic Christian. Mm-hmm. So this woman had brought crystals that she had prayed over and brought them to this mom's house. And she like really didn't know what to do with them. But the woman said, hey, I understand about you and your son. I wanted to bring you something. I prayed over these crystals. I thought you could have them. And she brought them into the home and her child immediately like was drawn to them. Mm-hmm. And now his room is like filled with crystals. And at some point, once she learned that they could communicate, he was sharing that I love these crystals. They have good energy. I need more good energy. They're like hypersensitive.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's why belief and love and compassion and trust just opens the floodgates for them.
Yes.
Because without that, the absence of that, it's like there's no frequency there that they can connect to.
Oh my gosh, Jasa. That's so wise.
You know,
Yes,
I don't
and
know. I
insightful.
just was like, because it like there's this pattern, and they love water, and water is a
Yes.
conduit for frequencies. We've
Yeah.
seen that. We're going to talk about some wild experience with water in some coming episodes. And they love music and sounds, and like that's all frequency that you can feel.
Yeah.
Right. So, man,
And
cool stuff.
I think one that we could end on
Yes.
is from Jean Paul. And he says, we value love more than valuables. Love is all that is important. We need to try to always love so this universe will survive.
I mean,
what else do you say?
Nothing.
You guys, if you have not,
do we not? If we haven't convinced you,
I know it. And going on this journey too. I mean, thankfully, Jasa found this and convinced me to
wouldn't shut up about it.
Yeah, so I jumped on board, and I am not disappointed that I did. So if you have not checked it out, highly recommend.
Highly recommend. So you guys, we're just getting started with season 3 of Unlocking Our Human Potential. Next week, be sure to tune in because we're going to be talking all about resonance theory and the power of group prayer.
I love this. This is a big one, you guys.
This is a big one. So stay tuned. It's super exciting. It's going to blow your mind yet again. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you're ready to take your spirituality to the next level, be sure to check out our website, spiritoutspoken.com. There you can download free educational resources, read our latest blog posts, and join the Spirit Outspoken community.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Spirit Outspoken to stay up to date on news, happenings, shenanigans, and all things Spirit Outspoken.